At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Frieda Fabile. Now, Frieda has been a member of the Historical Society, and you're a Dahlonega Nugget, aren't you?
I am a Dahlonega Nugget.
She's a Dahlonega Nugget. She's born and bred. She's a Dahlonega Nugget. She's been here all her life. And Frieda has been a great champion of Frank Hall. She's done a numerous amount of research on him, and tonight she's going to give you a great program about the history of Frank Hall and some of the contributions he did to Dahlonega. Frieda won the Madeline Anthony Award for the year 2007. You know, she actually won it in 2008 for her work on the production of Legend of the Smith House Mine movie, which is also available here if anyone's interested in purchasing that. And so I'm just going to let Frieda go ahead and talk. Now, she told me that she can do this without her notes, so I'm going to go ahead and she knows so much here. I'll put it over to Frieda now.
Well, thank you guys. It's a great honor that Chris had emailed me and contacted me. We've been, for years, we have been exchanging history stuff, especially about Free Jim, because we had known that Free Jim was one of the first owners of the property here at the Smith House. And so we would always exchange, history tips. We walked out, me and him and Ann. How many years ago was that, Ann, that we walked out and it was like blowing snow, and here all of us is bundled up behind Consolidated Mine. And so we go back a long ways. We've done some crazy stuff. That was the crazy stuff that we did. But it was fun. It was fun. And but I want to thank y'all for allowing me to speak to you guys tonight. It is a privilege and an honor. I wasn't a very big history bug in school. I studied to take a test, and so when we had found the mine shaft, and I want to thank my parents. My parents are here, Freddie and Shirley Welch. They brought me into the world, and that's why I'm here today. But when we had found the mine shaft back in 2006, my dad had gave us a call. It was 2006. It was on Valentine's Day. And me and my husband, Mike, we had just got in from church, and my dad had called me, and he was ecstatic saying, we found it. And I said, you found what? And he says, we found Frank Hall's mine shaft. And I said, you did? And I was like, and he says, yes, we found it. So here me and Mike, we load up with our cameras, and I'm like, I have no idea what he's talking about. And we came up here and we saw the legend of Frank Hall, what he left for our family. My dad, Freddie, he was basically, and I'm not lying, born and raised here at the Smith House. My grandparents, I'm just going to give a little history about my family, and but my grandparents in 1946 came here to work for the Frieda family, who they wanted to have a restaurant but had very little knowledge in running a restaurant. My grandparents had a lot of knowledge, and so they brought to the table of running their restaurant for them. So in the 1950s, they moved the operations down into the basement area. It used to be, before the 50s, it was all upstairs, all the dining and everything upstairs. So actually my dad was born, and he was brought back here as his first home. So he is actually, if you want to talk about somebody that was born and raised here in the Smith House, that would be my dad. My mom, she did extensive research on Frank Hall. So when we found this mine shaft, I just went and just gathered all of her notes and just started reading her notes, and that's what started me on that journey. And so she has extensive research on Frank Hall. We went, actually right after, we went up to the library and got on the microchip, whatever the thing is called, and was looking at, whatever the thing is called, with all the Dahlonega nuggets, looking at all the Dahlonega nuggets and, whatever that thing is called, looking at all the Dahlonega nuggets to try to see what we could find about history. And so that really started my spark of just going down deep, trying to find as much history as I could about the Smith House. I knew basic information about history because of my mother. She made sure that we knew, because we started working. It depends. What year did I start working, or what year does the government needs to know that I started working? So, that's, people says, how long have you been working here? Well, let's see, legally, but she made sure that we knew the history. And I was sitting there going, yeah. Didn't really realize that it was really going to benefit me one day. So when we produced the Smith House DVD, it is all of the research that we had found and even further research. But I know you're here to talk about Frank Hall, for me to talk about Frank Hall. I have some very interesting facts. A lot of you already know, if you're a history bug, you already know all the history about Frank Hall, what he leaves behind. Most of you have written about Frank Hall. And so Frank Hall is the one who started my family's journey here. So, but my family is, and I want to thank my husband and my son for being here as well. My husband, poor thing, he's my sounding board. Every time I find something and I'm so excited, I get home and he's like sitting there going, yeah. And I'm like sitting there going, I know, and after I say it, I'm like, well, that doesn't really sound like that. But, you know, it's just like a little nugget every time you start researching, you start looking, and you go dry, and you're like, and then after a little while, you get just this little bitty vein, and you're like, I know there's something at the end of this, you know, and he's been my sounding board all these years, and me just saying, you know, so he has traveled this journey with me, and Evan, my son, right here, who has just graduated from high school, he's been a big supporter of me. So I just have a great family, and I just really think that the Smith House is just the icing off of it, you know. So, but when we had found the mine shaft back in 2006, like I said, it had provoked me to, you know, research and out of all that research, my friends Scott and Sherry Gray, who has a video company production here in Dahlonega, we all got together, put all of our history stuff, and we said, let's make a video of it. And so we did. We made a video, and it has all the living owners who are sane. That's on it. You know, some of the ones that we were like, question their sanity a little bit. But we made sure that we had everybody interviewed. My dad was interviewed. I chose not to be interviewed. I'm not in the video. I'm only in the writings there. But I chose not to be. I just wanted my history just to be portrayed. But a lot of people, you know, past owners are videoed, and all the history is portrayed. It was a great success. It was a huge success. The video is still selling today, but however, there was a need. People are kind of still coming in. My mother wrote the first cookbook, which is The Boarding House Reach, and it was a huge success. But right now the publication is out of date, and so we've been tossing around the idea of writing another cookbook. So I said, well, my thing is history. Her thing is cooking. So, you know, she's history too, but, you know, she's a great cook. You know, she sort of looks at my cooking and go, ooh, we need to tweak that a little bit. And, but so we've decided to, you know, so I've taken her cookbook and I've added the history to it. I started this journey about a year ago and just writing history, and it was facts. So I had my mom to read it. And I had asked Ann, and I said, Ann, I want you to read this for me. It was a little too history, you know. I know that I was like, it was just too many facts. And she said, you know, it's really good. You've got good research, but people want stories. And I was like, stories? Okay. And then my mom was like, you know, it's a lot of facts. You may lose the reader. And I said, yeah. And so then I took off back starting about August. I started doing history stories. So the cookbook has a story, and then on the right side it has a recipe that goes along with that story. I've tried to. So hopefully by summer, I'm thinking, I'm not sure. Gabby keeps, you know, telling me, you know, because I was thinking, let's get it done for Christmas, and she's like, you know. So I have asked Gabby. I call her Gabby, and her real name is Gabrielle. And she's going to help me because I'm not that very good at portraying, you know, I'm not that good of a writer. I know that. I know what my strong points are, and I know what my weak points are. So we have asked her if she would help us be able to take the stories that I've already written and try to make them presentable to the reader. So that's in effect right now. To me, it's like, hey, can we have it done by spring? You know, and that's just not... You know, but so hopefully by spring or summer. the cookbook be ready. We're just right now we're trying to get some sample pages out to the North Georgia College Press to see if they'll accept us to be a publisher. So we're on the journey. We're on the right journey. So I know that all you've got a lot of history. If you want to share some with me, I would love to. You know, the book is not complete, but it is on its way, and everything that I mentioned tonight is going to be in the book. There's stories about the Cherokee Indians. There's stories about the miners. There's stories about Frank Hall. There's stories about my family, my grandparents, the Fries, the Smiths, and so we've got all kinds of stories about everything about, I mean, not everything about Lumpton County, but I just sort of highlighted a lot of things, and a big write-up about the mine shaft, about Frank Hall. But right now I would like to take the time to go a little history search with you about Frank Hall. He's known as Frank Wayland Hall. And Frank Hall, you know, you have to have reading glasses when you get to a certain age, right? So I'm right there. So Frank Wayland Hall, he was born in Vermont. If y'all don't mind, I would like to, because this is a lot of dates, and I know all of y'all know dates, and I want to make sure that I get my accuracy right. So I want to make sure that some of this stuff I'm going to be reading from, then some of it, hopefully, it'll come to memory for me. But on April 18th, 1845, Frank Hall was born in Vermont to a Lyman Hall and a Miranda Kirch Hall. And that was in Jericho, Vermont. His father was listed on the 1860 census record as a farmer. His mother was born in 1818, also in Vermont, and she died in Lumpton County in 1908. Frank, he served in the Civil War as a 16th Vermont Infantry Company A officer from 1861 to 1865. He was moved to corporal in 1862. His troop is listed as one of the members who fought at Gettysburg. So right after the war, Frank marries Eleanor Hall. And at that time, Hall is operating a furniture company. And the furniture company is called the Doubleday Hall and Company, and that is also in Vermont. And I do have some notes about this that is actually from one of the newspapers. And it says, and this is actually from the Dahlonega Nugget. No, actually, I'm sorry, it's from the Dahlonega Signal. Is that what it's called, Dahlonega Signal? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Among the arrival in town this week, we are glad to see the face of Colonel N.H. Hand of Cleveland, Ohio, and Mr. Frank W. Hall of Vermont. The latter gentleman will be remembered by all of our citizens as the former infatigable superintendent of the Yehula and Cane Creek Mining Company business, and has returned among us for a short time to aid in getting up the machinery of the Hand Gold Mining Company of this place. Colonel Hand will lend his presence for a short time to the interests of this company and put all of his energies to work to have operations commence at this short practical moment. And it says, when we noticed in our last the arrival of Mr. Frank Hall of Vermont, we are gladly in hopes that he will had come to be one of us again, and regret to learn that his sojourn will be just a few days. Mr. Hall for several years was superintendent of the mining operation, which is now reorganized under the name of the Hand Gold Mining Company, which is the largest operation of the character in the state. And his gentlemanly bearing, his fine business character, and social qualifications, he won the confidence of the entire community. I think he wrote that. We know of none of this community would be more gladly welcomed back to it than Mr. Hall and his estimable lady. He informed us that he would gladly return, but for the business arrangements he had entered into, which precludes it. He is now one of the firm of Doubleday Hall and Company, manufacturing and wholesale dealer in furniture of all described in Vermont. We see from his circular that this firm is making furniture adaptable to the wants of the South. a specialty and trust that they may be able to build up a prosperous trade. We most heartily commend this firm to our dealers with full confidence that they will give entire satisfaction to their company. So that is saying that is coming from the paper. So a little bit later, Frank comes to Dahlonega as, and I had just read that, as a millwright and representative of the Boston, Massachusetts company who has an interest in the Yehula River and Creek hydraulic hose mining company. However, there was a scandal that happened within the company between the shareholders and the managers of the company. And later, one of the manager, Nathan Hand, acquired the property, and so the company became the Hand Mine Company. Somehow, Frank Hall, he had something to do with the lawsuit, and a sizable amount was issued to him. A little bit later, Frank is offered the position at the consolidated company to oversee the mines in Lumpkin County. Eleanor and Frank moves here permanently and is listed on the census as their home place in Lumpkin County in 1870 and 1880. So they permanently move here. Frank Hall, mother, moves here as well shortly after that and marries a John Freeland on September 3rd, 1882. So, what I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say the known facts about Frank Hall, which I had these pictures made, and I hope everybody got a chance to be able to look at them. This is something that I had printed. I had all my little history. I wanted to do a visual of everything about Frank Hall, the legend of Frank Hall. So everything I could think about. His mother, this is his picture. This is his wedding announcement. This is actually the Smith house. This is the Hall house. This is another picture of the Smith house. The Hall block, along with the Hall house, the Hall block, Hall house, Hall office. And this is the Hall villa right here that he had built. Here's another recent picture of the Hall block. This is his patented stamp mill, and this is his jail that he built. And then what my family is most interested in, of course, with all of this, brings a lot of business to Dahlonega, but the mine shaft that my dad had discovered back in 2006. And here is a picture of the Frank Hall mine shaft. So I'm not going to get into that picture yet. But I wanted to tell known facts about that, so I'm going to elaborate on the facts that's of that picture. In 1868, this is just known facts about Frank Hall. Most of y'all are very familiar with this, so I'm going to give you some known facts about Frank Hall, and then I'm going to go into some unknown facts about Frank Hall that you'll be very interested in, and I'm very interested in. In 1868, he was appointed postmaster of Dahlonega and reappointed in 1876. In 1880, he builds the first jail in Dahlonega and was still in use in 1930, which is the picture I showed you there. In 1881, and it's also still here in Dahlonega, as everybody knows here. In 1881, he builds the Hall block as his mercantile building. And also in 1881, he builds the Hall house for his wife, Eleanor, and his traveling guest, and so that she can have her hospitality portrayed to the public, I guess. And in 1881, he built himself an office, which is the Hall office that connects the two buildings, which is still there today. Yeah. And so another thing that he is known for, Frank Hall is known for harnessing the Hightower River to establish the village of Jay. He builds a sawmill, grist mill, tannery, store, post office, and then cottages are soon to appear, and a postmaster serves in Jay from 1882 to 1885. In 1889, Jay requests a charter to organize a municipal government as J.B. Thomas as mayor. Leather, shingles, and lumber are shipped out along the rough roads. The thriving town back then, but when the charter was denied, the town soon died. Today, only remains is Jay Bridge. And I wanted to read a couple of articles from the Nugget about the town of Jay. And this is from the Nugget, and this is March 23rd, 1923. Excuse me, 1923. Many years ago, Captain Frank Hall harnesses the Hightower River in Davis District, built a sawmill, grist mill, operates a large tannery, had a store and a U.S. post office, and called the place J. A number of cottages was erected and soon were occupied. The leather was shipped to distant markets, and the sale was found for a large amount of shingles and lumbers was hauled to markets by teams over very narrow, muddy, rough roads. He did big business there for years, and J was a lively little town, but there is nothing there now to mark the ever once very busy place. And then it goes on. I'm not going to read the rest of that. And then I do have a copy of an article from the paper, March 27th, 1885, and it's from J. It says, and this is in the Signal, never seeing anything mentioned in your valuable journal about this section of Lumpkin County, I thought I would drop you a few lines. We can boast about the nice little village named J. Whether this place is named after Mr. J. Adams or former clerk that used to be here, or a J. Bird, I am at loss to know. We are situated on the banks of the Hightower River, some 7 miles from Dahlonega, on the mail route to Ellijay. Here is situated some of the best mills and enterprises in northeast Georgia. Here we have a saw and grist mill, furniture factory, post office and store. Here we get goods and provision about as cheap as we can buy in Gainesville. We have a first-class tannery, second to none in the state. Bark is plentiful and cheap. Black oak, $2, chestnut oak, $2.50 per load delivered. The mills and property belongs to the enterprising merchant F.M. Blackmere. There is a prospect of a big ditch being cut here in our immediate vicinity, taking part of the waters of the Etowah, which will give you plenty of work if cut to a robust, I don't know what that word is. And if our contemplated railroad would only just push through your town, it would be the most advent of a new man and enterprise. So the question of the railroad or not, bridge or not, across Leathers Ford, which the citizens of Lumpkin County ought to have at any expense, whether we get a railroad or not. That's another confirmation of Jay, and we all know that the village was there. The last one I'm going to read is, and this is from the Signal, March 3rd, 1893. We notice that the 4 of the jury revisers have met and rendered their verdict against near 700 votes and sentenced them to remain in the box. No, that's not it. Okay, I'm sorry. That was my ending. Oh, that was about all right, from Jay. Farmers in this section are considerably behind with their works. We hope your citizens will help us get a bridge across the river at J, for as soon as the spring rains set in, we will be cut off from all communications with the outside world unless we can have the services of a carrier pigeon. Quite a lot of lumber is being sawed at J Mill for the various mines around Dahlonega. Mr. Bud Hightower of Dahlonega has been up at Hall's Mill for some time, superintending the sawing up all the stock they had on hand. Sorry about before. Oh, thank you. And so I wanted to read you a couple of sections that I had found about Jay and the articles in my history collection. Going back to Frank Hall, some interesting facts. He was a member of the Board of Trustees in the North Georgia Agricultural College, over here. One of the first public school board trustees serving as president. He served in Georgia legislature as a mayor of Dahlonega. In 1890, Hall is the original owner of the Dahlonega Nugget, first published. 1897, Hall purchases and repairs the Besser House, built in 1841, formerly owned by Harrison Riley. And Harrison Riley is a really interesting fellow. He is a very interesting. I don't think he cared anything about what anybody thought. Just to give you that. I've got a nice little story about Harrison Riley that I had found in one of the newspapers that is just, it was priceless. I had to put it in the book. And so he buys the Besser House that was formerly owned by Harrison Riley and renames it to the Halls Villa. And I think on one of the pictures, I don't remember which one it was over there, but it says F. Frank W. Hall on the building. I mean, big, bold letters. I think he wanted to state that he did purchase the building. So he renames it the Hall Villas. John Moore purchases this estate and deeds it over to the state for dormitories until it burned to the ground in January 1942. Frank Hall was a member of the Presbyterian Church and contributed to construction of the church in 1899 and donates to the Dahlonega Campground, an elegant dwelling for the preachers there. He donates land for the Ashley School over 3 miles south of Dahlonega, and he is also a heavyweight. In 1897, he is awarded the title one of the heaviest men in Lumpton County, weighing in at 274 pounds. There was only 17 citizens that was able to compete against him in Lumpton County at that time. So 17 students, yeah. There was only 17 citizens at that time that was nominated, weighing over 200 pounds. So he weighed in at 274. So he would have been a nice little hunk of meat, right? So he purchases another home from Harrison Riley, which is called the Hope House, which was located up here at the top of the parking lot here at the Smith House, right by the real pretty sign up there. And it was formerly located here on the Smith House property. He purchased that in 1895. The Hope House, actually I have a lot of memories of the Hope House because my mother turned it into a bakery and she named it the Sugar Shack. And she had a thriving business at that time. I would come, and I remember because we would just crawl over. As kids, we explored. And she would bring us real early. She'd have to come in early to do the breakfast and have everything baked up. And so we would come in me and my brother would come in real early along with my cousin. We would come in real early and we played in that house. We pretended like we were ghosts. And I mean, we about drove my mother crazy. But I had a lot, and I just wanted to let you know that I have actually a personal connection with the Hope House. I actually played there when I was a little girl. And so it's really funny because I would have never realized that that's one of the oldest houses in Dahlonega. It is still, they did not tear it down. We did have it moved. It's had 2 locations other than its original spot. But the foundation of the house, my dad came up with the idea of taking the foundation of the rocks, and the rocks is actually at the mine shaft. That is the actual foundation of the Hope House. So the Hope House still lives here at the Smith House, but it's only its foundation. But that's a really interesting fact I wanted to throw in there. So the Frank Hall also purchases a lot here at the Smith House for $200. Hall was well respected in the mining community, of course. He was chairman of the Committee of Mines and Mining. Dahlonega referred to him as Captain Frank Hall, or Captain Hall. So anytime you saw his name in the newspaper, more than likely it was either referred to as Captain. It was always Captain Frank Hall. Every time I looked up something, it was always Captain Frank Hall. Frank Hall also, and this is what I wanted to get to, is he patented the Frank Hall stamp mill. And I did a nice little thing here for you guys. Here's a picture of the stamp mill, along with his designs and along with the patent there. So if you can take time, maybe afterwards, and look at it, it's very good information. And also in the middle, down to the bottom, is his advertisement of him selling the actual stamp mill. So that is all about Frank Hall Stamp Mill. And I wanted to get a little bit about the stamp mill, the history of it. Stamp mills are not a new invention. This was not a new invention. Stamp mills has been around for a very long time, but it was only perfected for a specific reason. There are evidence that the Greeks used a stamp mill around the 3rd BC, driven by water pedestals, and used well into the 1st century AD for pounding and hulling grain. The earliest stamp mill used for metals was by the Romans in the 1st and 2nd century. These stamp mills were hydraulically driven from the area's supply of water. The first stamp mill recorded in the U.S. was at Capes Mine in Charlotte, North Carolina. And how the process, to me, I just thought it might be nice to be able to give you a little history and how the process works. A miner would deliver ore to the mill and unload it into an ore cart. When the screen called the grizzle, thus given the name after the grizzly bear's claws, the claws were equally spaced, metal plates, the ore would pass through. The smaller ore passed through and down into the ore chute, where the larger passed into the crusher. After crushing, the crushed ore passed through metal plates under the stamp battery, and water ran down the crusher, thus turning the fine sand into fine sand, then taken to the recovery table, a sheeted table coated with mercury. The gold stuck to the mercury. The sand was thus the extra sand was then thus more taken back to the stamp, pulverized again, and then to the recovery table again. The table revealed the contents of gold and mercury and strained through a chemos, I don't know what that is, whatever. Further smelted down into blocks of gold bullions. Lumpton County, and this was stated as an article written in the Engineering and Mining Volume Journal, volume number 58. Lumpton County produced more gold in the 65 years prior to 1894 than any other southern state. So that's a pretty big award to give it to Lumpton County. So back to Frank Hall. Eleanor, his wife, she dies in 1898. She dies at the age of 56. Frank then remarries the same year to Esther Caroline Brown, and I wanted to read to you The Wedding on the Waves. And it's a pretty elegant, it had 2 write-ups about that. And The Wedding of the Waves of when they were married. Now, do remember that Frank Hall is one of the richest men in Lumpton County. He is very, very, very wealthy. So he is a very good eligible bachelor now. So, and The Wedding of the Waves, the wedding of Honorable Frank W. Hall and Mistress Esther C. Brown yesterday afternoon took the place under the circumstances exceptionally novel and beautiful. At 2 o'clock, the party sailed away from the wharf in front of Mr. Hall's cluster of elaborate tents that nestled under the great outspreading forest trees at his camp 2 miles north of Palm Beach. The party on board consisted of the bride and groom, the mother of the groom, Mrs. Hall, and it says everybody who was there, and also the skipper. As they shot by the Riviera Hotel towards Pitt's Island, Mr. Mulford alluded it a fitting term to the shapely little craft and the occasion, and then christened her the Esther C. in honor of the bride. He then offered a prayer referred to our Lord Jesus, who in the days of his earthly pilgrimage blessed with the presence and fishing boats of Simon Peter and Andrew, his brother. He spoke of this boat as set apart for the purpose of health, restfulness, and recreation. Immediately after this, Mr. Mulford performed the marriage ceremony of the Episcopal Church in the cabin with doors and windows wide open, inside of the sea and the white wharf. In the white surf leaping high over the beach. The ceremony rendered from memory, impressive and without the use of the prayer book, was in full keeping with the freshness of the scene, the soft breezes and the blue sky sparkling lake, and the music of the waves around the bow never seemed more in harmony with the spirit of nature or the joyful dignity of a true marriage. Now, who would have a marriage announcement like that? I know I didn't. All right, isn't that great? Then actually the Dahlonega Nugget had a little write-up. April 8th, 1898, the wedding of Frank Hall. The Esther C., an ideal of snuggle comfort, was just finished and put into commission yesterday morning. The characteristics of the craft will be found described in another column, but we cannot forbear alluding to her many appointments: the sliding beds, the long folding table, the compacted cupboard, the nook for stove, the niche for water cooler, the room-saving lockers, and the ample cockpit, all developed under the supervision of the owner. Mr. Hall has for several winters resorted to the lake with a little party of friends. He comes fully equipped for the season of restfulness and thoroughness, enjoys a wonderful winter climate. Mr. Hall is one of the prominent citizens of North Georgia and is largely identified with the gold mining interest of that part of the state and of Dahlonega, a successful industrial established prior to the discovery of gold in California. The service rendered by Mr. Hall and his legislative body of Georgia and of various other responsible positions has gained him the esteem and confidence of the community, where he commanded presence and splendor physique simply passes as an outward token of the intrinsic character within. So that is sort of telling you about what kind of wedding, sort of like tells us about their marriage, the richness of their marriage. A couple of other different facts here. So Frank Hall marries Esther. He was 26 years older than he. So, we've had a couple of different words to say here at Smith House, maybe gold digger or something like that, that we might have been awarded her name. But, so Frank, he had built Eleanor a house. So, in terms, his second wife should have a grander house. And so he decided that him and Esther lived in the Hope House for the first part of their marriage. They were only married just for several years. And he wanted to build a much grander house for his second wife. So he built the Smith House for Esther Caroline. While construction was being completed, like I just said, that they lived in the home purchased by Mr. Riley. So when the construction was complete in 1898, while he was excavating the basement, he located right conditions for a rich-bearing gold vein. The record is listed in the 1898 Dahlonega Nugget as workmen excavated the basement of rich ore being found underground. The excerpts, this is from the Dahlonega newspaper in 1899. It's so hard reading some of these old writings because we don't really talk like this. Captain Hall Worksman, while excavating the cellar for his new warehouse on the corner of Chestatee and Water Streets, just across from R.H. Webb's lot, struck a rich gold-bearing vein several feet wide, depths unknown. The gravel about the vein shows up exceedingly well in a pan. The vein is one that Mr. Clark, the magnet man, pointed out to Mr. Webb last summer, as yet they have no opportunity for testing the ore by means of a mill. But judging from the appearance of the ore, it must be worth between $5 to $50 but judging from the appearance of the ore, it must be worth, I already told you that. And probably more than that if they would go a few feet deeper. The vein crosses the street and runs under what is known as the Old Kelly Lot, that way, where gold has been found for about 40 years. Captain Hall informs us that he will not develop it. One reason is that because it is under the building that he had built and on the town lot, and the other is that he hasn't got any time to spend in the working gold mines, but Mr. Webb feels highly elated in the discovery, as he had been prospecting it for some time and now feels satisfied that Mr. Clark has the dip to locate veins, and as there are 2 veins already located on his lot, he indicates to have them opened up in a short time. So if you can have the chance to be able to look at the mine shaft downstairs, we have uncovered the vein. We have had it tested, and it's tested, the gold tests in as red gold, 99.9% pure. Only Auraria most of the Auraria gold mining that came out of Auraria was 99.9% pure. So that's a little interesting little gold fact for you guys. So, so the shaft was uncovered by my dad that he had found. and that was in Valentine's Day of 2000 and 2006. I don't know if it was a Valentine's Day present or just a massacre to the family, but it has been quite of a joy for us to sort of deep ourselves into history. But so I conclude in my history search that I can sort of pinpoint who I know who covered the mine. The Frieda family who purchased the house from the Smiths. There was two sets of Smiths who owned the Smith house. Okay, so let me back up a little bit. Frank Hall built the house. He lived a very short time after building the house. Then, hi there, how are you? He only lived a little bit longer. He died in 1901. Y'all can come on in. I'm good. He died in 1901, and so when the Smith house was sold to Henry and Bessie Smith in 1922. Bessie wanted to showcase her cooking. They started up a bed and breakfast in 1922. And so after her death, Ben did not want to continue running the operations. It was just too hard for him. So he sold it to William Smith. And if y'all know history a little bit about Atlanta, research the Mary Fagan case. He was the black janitor's lawyer in that case. So he only owned the Smith house from 1944 to 1946. So, you know, when you research it, look for William Smith. That is the owner of the Smith house for 2 years. And I do have a section of that in the cookbook. And so in 1940, when he was selling it, you could sell a house for a sizable amount if you had a finished basement. So we feel that he is the one that covered the mine because before that we have newspaper articles that has dated before 1946. So we can pretty much, pinpoint that Will Smith is the one who covered it up in concrete. I can't tell you if that's concrete and in stone or not, but that's from my history search. That's the opinion that I give. And so what's an interesting fact is when my father was born, he lived in the back of the kitchen there. So, where am I here? Okay, so, and I've already went through how my dad had said we had found the mine shaft, we had found Frank Hall's mine shaft. So instantly, we threw my husband down on a ladder and told him to go down and see what's down there. So he climbs down in a ladder, and I'm sitting here going, did I pay his life insurance? And so he went down, he started digging. We found a lot of stuff. I mean, that was crazy, because when he got down to the bottom, the earth was uneven. He said, I don't know if this is actually the bottom. I sort of got scared because I thought, this is going to collapse in on him. It shows the notches where the men used, they had a boarding system that they would climb down. But when he started digging the artifacts up, and one of the interesting things that we had found, a lot of things are broken because we didn't know what was down underneath. And then when we started finding that there was china coming up, there were whiskey bottles coming up, there was a light bulb that come up, we started to be a little bit more careful, and that we've got tons of broken stuff that just is not displayable, but there was a lot of stuff in that mine shaft. But when one of the interesting artifacts that came from the Hall legacy is I have a lotion bottle. It's a little lotion, and it's inscribed with Frank Hall's mother's initials into it. So one of her lotion bottles was down there. But along with a lot of things, the Smith's pattern that she used here. So everything's on display out there, and it's free. Y'all can look at it. We've got a lot of history about all the different owners. Frank Hall is listed there with his achievements and everything. So Frank Hall's legend continues through the Welch family. So I want to go into a little bit of facts that you don't know about Frank Hall, which I think is interesting. You know, you can come to these history meetings and you can just sort of find out what you already know. You sort of polish it up and hearing it again. But I want to bring some stuff to the tables that you may not know that might interest you into digging a little bit deeper like I did. So we know that Frank had married Esther in 1898. He is listed here on the 1900 census as living here at this spot. It's really hard for me to imagine. I know that there's always been things written in our history and other history that says that he never lived here in this house. It's hard for me to imagine that Esther did not live in this house, but that's one thing that I am going to find out is if actually she did move in. I know he moved his office here, so it's hard for me to imagine that she did not move into her grand house. But one thing that I do want to let you know is that on the 1900 Lumpkin County Census, Frank Wayland Hall is listed. Esther Caroline Hall is listed, and also a Francis Hall is listed as their child. So in the history books, I've seen it written that Frank Hall has a son. I've seen it that Frank Hall has no children, but I have valid facts that Frank Hall did have a daughter, and she did survive. And if you would like to look that up, it's on the 1900 Lumpkin County Census. So I just started digging deeper. I even signed up for the free Ancestry trial with 2 accounts. Sorry, honey. You have an account with Ancestry now. But so I just was doing 2 computers, and I was just searching both of them at the same time. And so I just started just going down deep with this. I'm like, I never knew he had a daughter. You know, the person that needs to know is me. So I just started searching. So I went back to the Frank Hall is buried in the Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta. And he has a mausoleum. I never can say this. The guy down there laughs at me every time I talk to the mausoleum. He has a mausoleum, and he laughs at me every time and corrects me every time. His name is Sam Reed. Yeah, well, he corrects me every time. He likes to correct me. But he has a mausoleum down there. He is buried, and his daughter, Frances Hall Church, is buried beside him. So, and why I never knew that he had a daughter is because Frank Hall died of typhoid fever at their home in Ingleside in 1901. He had 3 homes. He had the home here in Lumpkin County, of course. He had a home in Ingleside, and he also had his Palm Beach residence that he had. And he did not like the winters of Dahlonega. So he would travel down. When it started getting cold, he migrated like the rest of the campers do now. So he migrated down to the warmer climate. Actually, I don't have to read this. I know all this by facts. I've been studying this forever. So Frances Hall is listed on the Lumpkin County Census. I don't find her again until 1920. She is listed on the Chicago, Illinois Census along with her mother, and she had married a George Brown. So Esther had been married before 1920 to a George Brown. At this time, Frances is 19 years old. Her name is listed as Frances Gray. So George married Esther, Frank Hall's second wife, and they all took on George's last name. I don't find Frances again until she's buried next to her father. She dropped the Gray last name and took on her father's last name of Hall. So she's a little bit of a surprise to us. I'm really excited about revealing her to you guys because I think that she is the legacy of Frank Hall. I have not, in my search, which is a new search right now, I have not found that she has had any children, but my search does continue. Esther, I find her again in the 1940 census. Frances is not living with her. In the 1940 census, she is in Dade County. She's at her Palm Beach residence, living with her daughter that was in middle school. So when she was in Illinois in 1928, Esther had another child. So Frances has a a half sister that I cannot find any legacy that goes on with her. She had no children as well. My whole hopes in this is why I'm doing this search of Frances, because I think it's really neat to have Frances, but this house was built for Esther Hall. And I think it would be fitting if we had a picture of Esther Hall on our walls. And so my search does continue to find Esther. Esther is a missing part of my puzzle. And so, that is my history search right now, is to find a picture. And look at Chris. He's gonna be digging deep, because he always does it. He'll bring the stuff. Is to find a picture of Esther. And now it was just a picture of Esther, but now I think it would be fitting to have a picture of Esther holding Frances here on the walls here at the Smith House. So that is my search. Another interesting fact, a little history bug that I want to give to you, and this will conclude my presentation, is that Frank Hall, he served in the Civil War as a 16th Vermont Infantry. He fought at Gettysburg. Remember, we had said that. J.M. Almond was the executor of Frank Wayland Hall last will and testament. So he entrusted J.M. Almond for all of his possessions he left here on the earth. J.M. Almond, I had one of the guys who has been helping me, Addison. He researched J.M. Almond for me, and he found out that he also fought in the Gettysburg War. He was of the Georgia troop. He was of the unit which was called the Cobb Legion. They fought against each other in Gettysburg, but when Frank Hall died, he left all of his possessions to make sure he's distributed to one of his enemies that he had fought against, but then soon became best friends with. So I thought I might leave you with that. So thank y'all. I know I took a lot of time, yes, I did not do that. Frances passed away in 1966, but I can tell you that for sure, because I told you I'd tell you that by heart, but I had that date. Frances was born March 8th, 1901, and Frank dies. Okay, this is an interesting fact. Frances is born March 8th, 1901. Frank, her father, dies October 26th, 1901, at the age of 56. Frances was a little into 6 months being old. She was almost 7 months old whenever he passed away. Frances dies before her mother, which was Esther, at the age of 64 on October 16th, 1965. And then Esther dies at the age of 92. On her death certificate, she's listed as DeKalb County, so I'm wondering if she died at her residence in Ingleside. I don't have listed here the date that she died. Well, she died I think she died the year after Frances had died. So she was 92. A little bit of history facts for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
As customary, we'd like to present our guest or keynote speaker with a little memento for his great presentation. So we'd like to give Frieda a copy of Anne's most recent book and autograph, by the way.
I want a 3-page autograph, though. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and our next meeting will be held next year, January 8th, 2015. And our guest speaker will be our Vice President, David Connolly. So we hope to see you all there, and everybody has a great and happy holidays, and don't forget about cleaning up the rest of this food.
Stay and eat.
Stay and eat. And socialize. Thank you all for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you.